Hello, and welcome to Wapaki National Monument. Wapaki is one of several pueblos here at the National Monument, and it is by far the largest of its time. And one of many factors that made this possible was the natural resources and natural food sources that surround Wapaki. Today we're going to be going on a short walking tour around the monument, and I'm going to be pointing out a couple plants on the landscape that the Pueblo people used in clothing, in sewing, and as a food source. And those plants are going to be yucca, agave, and prickly pear cactus. So if you'll follow me, we're going to go look at some examples of a yucca. Here we can move between scenes. And I yucca. So this is yucca baccata. It is plentiful in the desert, and it is used as a food source, a tool, and as a piece of clothing. Yucca can be used in sewing by taking the needle-like tips of each of the leaves and using that as a needle, while using these fibrous strands as thread. Additionally, it can be used as a food source. The roots of the yucca, the flowers, and the fruits of the yucca are all edible. They take varying amounts of preparation, but you can eat all those parts of the yucca. Cool. So now we're going to go look at another plant, very similar to the yucca, both in appearance and in use, and that plant is the agave. So here's an example of an agave, and you can see, unlike the yucca, the strands have turned into kind of spines that run down the sides of the leaf. And you have to watch out for those. Additionally, these tips at the end of the agave are very sharp. One really rough story I've heard is someone got one stuck in their knee joint, totally locked up their leg. So definitely watch out for those when you're walking on the trail. However, agaves have several practical uses that make them very worthwhile to seek out. Similarly to the yucca, they can be eaten. You can eat the flowers, stalk, and root as a food source with agave. And I forgot to mention this with yucca, but both yucca and agave produce large stalks that make them fairly easy to find on the landscape. Now with agave, similarly to yucca, you can take the needle here and use that for sewing or as a tool. But additionally, people would take the needle tips of the agave and another part of the agave that they would then burn, and they would take the charcoal from that burnt agave, mix it with water, dip the needle in the water, and actually give tattoos using the agave, and only parts of the agave. Yep. So we're now going to move on to another plant. Similarly to the yucca and the agave, this plant has spikes and spines, however, in much greater numbers. This is one you're probably already looking out for. It's the prickly pear cactus. And prickly pear cactus is common throughout the state of Arizona. They have it down in Tucson all the way up to here in Wapaki. And the prickly pear cactus is a very useful cactus. Both the pad here and the fruit can be eaten. In order to eat the pad of the prickly pear cactus, you have to obviously remove all the spines. And then after doing that, you can cut the pad of the prickly pear into strips. Once you've done that, you submerge them in boiling water, boil it for about 15 to 25 minutes, and then you are able to eat the prickly pear pad. Some people advise to bathe the parts of the pad in cold water after you boil it. I'm not sure if it adds any kind of flavor or benefit, but it's what I've heard. Now onto the fruits of the prickly pear cactus. These little pinkish, purplish bulbs. And you can use those for tons of things, from sweeteners to jellies to candy. Some people make a juice out of it. Um, and it's very sweet. Um, it was used in the past as a sweetener. It's used now as an alternative to sugar. Some people that are looking for healthy alternatives to things like high fructose corn syrup and other artificial sweeteners can look for prickly pear juice. Personally, back when I lived in Tucson, my dad and I would always participate in this prickly pear harvest, where basically we would go out into the land surrounding our house, and we would just collect all these prickly pear fruits. And you have to wear very thick gloves, and you have to watch out for all the needles, but it's well worth it when you come home and you strain out the juice, and you just make prickly pear juice, and it goes great in so many drinks. Whether you're looking for like a prickly pear margarita or a prickly pear lemonade, both are super refreshing. But one thing to note about prickly pear juice is it actually lowers your core temperature. So you can drink too much of it and actually wear yourself out. But it's really good for living in the desert. Who would have guessed desert plants good for making desert drinks? Cool. Um, that's the last plants on our tour. We're going to make our way back around the monument. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about some of these plants. If you have any questions about the ones we covered, or if you would like me to talk about any other plants you see here along the trail, please feel free to ask questions. Cool. But just one more closing word before we get back to the monument. We went over some very unique and useful plants today. These are plants that you can find pretty much anywhere in Arizona, from the southern to the northern border of the state. They've been used by dozens of different tribes of Native American people. And I hope that learning about these and how they use them and how we can use them maybe teaches you a little bit about how Wapaki National Monument came to be. And if you're ever lost out in the desert, you now know a couple more plants that you can use as a food source if you need to. So, I thank you all for your time. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about the flora of Wapaki National Monument. Cool.